Welcome back to the Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure, and everything else your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you go on and on and on and on and on about. Or maybe you've gone dark. Did you go dark? Sometimes you gotta go dark. Ghost Protocol. I get it. It's a lot to take in, this whole UFO thing. But it's so fun. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Last week we did a call with Luigi Vincentelli and Chris Ramsey on Friday. And we kind of pre-gamed about 15 minutes before the call. We were just sort of chit-chatting and we were talking about all of this stuff. And it was cool because we were joking about how as serious as all of this stuff is and the implications are, sometimes you do have to take a big, healthy step back and just kind of watch it like it's a movie, because it is wild and it is so crazy. And we don't really know. We really don't know what we know. And it's so hard to know what information is accurate or reliable and what's been tampered with and what's, been just sort of, it's a 75-year-old game of telephone in some respects. And so it can be helpful from time to time, between bouts of intense research into something to take a step back and kind of just eat some popcorn and, take it in. And I don't know. It was something that Chris said that brought that to mind. And I just thought it was really good advice. And I do that from time to time. You have to have a little bit of a break. I was talking to Xander about this, that every once in a while, about once a week, you need to take 2 or 3 days off, preferably kind of spaced out throughout the week, and try not to follow this stuff because it's a news cycle thing, right? There's a lot of demand for UAP content or UFO related content. And there's that demand creates this supply of kind of low quality information of people just trying to put stuff out there to fill that gap, whether it's for views or to build a channel or whatever. I mean, I see it with my own channel here. There's a minimum amount of once you find your groove, which took a while for Night Shift, but I think we found it now. But once you find that groove, you have to settle into a routine that's sustainable, that you can do, because you have to kind of commit to, this isn't something I'm doing right now. This is something I'm doing for a period of years. This is going to be an ongoing project. And when you kind of click into that mindset, you go, wow, okay, well, what can I commit to? Because I have to really organize this and put something together that's coherent and predictable. And so, you settle into a rhythm, and like our rhythm here is right now it's three live streams a week with maybe one deep dive every week or two, depending on how much time there is and what's available and what's going on. And you got to fill that time. So if there's not a story that's big at the moment, there's a temptation to sort of reach out and find stuff and make it sound bigger than it is. I try not to do that. It's hard because sometimes you have to lean into it. The algorithm likes what it likes. But it's just one of those things that you have to kind of balance. So I try to make it clear, at least fairly frequently, I think, on this channel, that a lot of what we're doing here is speculation and opinion. It is opinion, a lot of it. Some of it's the factual stuff. The closer you get to the center of the UAP movement, disclosure movement, The closer you get to real nuts and bolts craft and technology stored in actual physical buildings, and there's a rigidity and a solidity to it that is spelled out in congressional legislation, for instance. Like there's a realness to that. But as you get towards the fringe and out towards the edge, things get a little murky. They get a lot murky. So you have to be careful and sort of leave a trail of crumbs to find your way back. By the way, my internet is awful, and I'm making a change. We're switching over to a different ISP, but that won't happen until the 12th. So if the stream, if we're suffering from a weak stream today, please accept my apologies. We're working on it. And as soon as I can get all this equipment replaced and a totally different ISP in here, I'm going to do that. So right now it's scheduled for the 12th. Hopefully by the end of that week, we'll be up and running with a new attitude. You know what I'm talking about. Let's check the chat. Who's here in the chat? It's members only Monday. You know what that means. Members only. Get your jackets out. I should start wearing a members only jacket. Did that come and go again? That already came and went. That came and went about 10 years ago. Came back around. Members, this is our chance to catch up, chit chat, talk about what's going on. What's on your mind? What's on my mind? What are we looking at this week? What's coming across the night shift desk? Oh, yeah, my phone just went off. Oh, that's right. Tomorrow's election day. I almost forgot. That's not true. I didn't almost forget. It's important. Go vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but use your head and just go do it. Chris Hovord and the Mod Squad. Welcome, gang. Adam Wright. The Netflix series has already turned into one of the most contentious UFO documentaries in recent history. Well, Adam, I am excited to learn more because I've only watched the first episode. So tonight I'm watching episode 2, which I'll talk about on Wednesday, and then I'm going to watch episode 3 and talk about that on Friday. That's my plan. I thought the first episode was great, though. We'll get into that. Sage Sleuth, Shadow Patriot Terry, welcome, gang. Dave Roscoe, Gerald, great to see you. Hex, Heather, Trini Mac, Brad, Sage, who else is here? Random content. Oh, thanks. Gifted 5 memberships. Oh, you're a hero. Douglas Quaid. Quaid, are you here? Don't be such a Quaid. Douglas Quaid. Total Recall. Don't mess with your brain, pal. It ain't worth it. Some channel news. We broke 17,000 subs. This was awesome. We're at 17,158. Way to go. Oh, it went down. We lost 2. 17,156. Sorry to see you go, whoever left. Or maybe it was just an error on YouTube's part. But we broke 17,000. Congratulations. Go team. Yay us. We did it. Shout out to new members. Douglas Quaid. Let's get those people here. How good's your Arnold impression, Doug? Gavin Garland, Marla. My YouTube. Welcome. Who else? Bino, Love Extra, Stargazer, Rick Roberts, Jeffers, Era, Rob Fox, Hugo Minzoni, Doug Van Wiekel. Welcome. There's too many to name, but there's a few shout outs. We'll do the rest at the end of the show. Thank you guys for being members. Thank you for subscribing. If you're already a subscriber, thank you for being a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, do it. Why not? I mean, it only takes a second. It doesn't cost you anything. And to be honest, you probably won't even see my videos pop up anyway. But if you do, then you can just click on them and watch them and join the conversation. It's a lot of fun. Look, it's not about me so much. It's about all of us, right? We're all collectively watching the craziest conspiracy theory ever kind of come true and sort of happen. It's kind of weird. I think we can all agree it's a weird time to be alive. There's like robots and artificially intelligent supercomputers, and there's quantum computers and quantum communications, and it's crazy. It's a lot to keep in your head at any given moment. And even in the UAP space, there's so much going on from one day to the next. It's really tough to follow it all. And there's so many different podcasts now, very good ones too. It's hard to keep up with all of them. So we try to tackle that problem by bringing in a big group of cool UFO nerds like yourselves to join the conversation and kind of hang out with us. Come to the Discord server. You can get involved over there. We've got some great mods. We've got some awesome overlap too between us and Vetted and Psychoactivo podcast and Area 52 now. The gang from Project Gravatar. We just have a cool group, and I think that's really the goal of the channel, is to just create an environment where you feel like you get to hang out with other people who get it, or at least are trying to get it, right? Watching all this unfold and going, wow, does anybody else see this? Well, there's a lot of mass sighting events, but probably the biggest one that most people would recognize is the Phoenix Lights event. And if you go back on YouTube and you watch the Phoenix Lights videos that were uploaded, the few that were shot, there were a lot shot, considering that at that time shooting a video was a big pain in the ass. And you had to go get your camcorder and do all this stuff. But it was seen by so many people, and everybody had that moment, that campfire moment, like something spooky just happened, and we all experienced that, right? And I feel like that's what we're going through right now. There's something spooky. There's something strange in your neighborhood, and we're all kind of picking up on that, and we're watching it, and then and this is the thing. It's not like any other conspiracy theory where it's like, there are many strange, weird conspiracy things that one can find themselves obsessed with or studying for one reason or another. And you can fall down the YouTube rabbit hole and you can spend all your time on the internet. But with UFOs and UAPs, it's like every other time you turn around, there's somebody that was a former national security director, a former director of Central Intelligence, a former general, retired admiral, majors, colonels, captains, basically anybody, any branch of the military you can think of, there's somebody in a uniform, either now wearing it or that was at a high level of authority, often in charge of really, really powerful weapon systems or programs, entrusted with billions of dollars of equipment, personnel, logistical support. I mean, these are the people that we choose specifically because they are the most well-trained, highly qualified people to run this thing. I mean, unless I don't understand how it actually works. I mean, maybe there's something else going on to it, but I'm assuming the American military chain of command has chosen these people because they're right for the job. And every time you look, another one's turning around going, yeah, there's kind of a UFO thing. It's sort of a not so secret. Sorry, my camera's all weird today. So you see that enough and you start to go, well, wow, okay, well, there is some kind of a UFO thing going on. Now what do we do? Like, what does that even mean? What does that mean for us? So that's what Night Shift's about. We're trying to figure that out. We're trying to answer the human questions about the alien problem. Is it a problem? I don't know. It might be. Some people say it is. Is it it's not a non-issue, right? It's pretty significant. If they're here, they're doing something, right? Uh, and this is the thing that always gets me. It's not like they're you just accepting that they're here is one tiny piece of this, but the next step on that journey is you go, well, okay, how many are here? Exactly how many at any given moment? It's a corny movie. It's Xander hasn't seen it. Xander, I don't know if you're watching, but Xander, you got to watch They Live. If you haven't seen it yet, you have to watch it. John Carpenter, Roddy Piper. Um, it's corny, but it's kind of poignant too for many reasons. And it's been called a documentary just because sort of the subject matter and subtext. Uh-oh, my bit rate is lower than it's supposed to be. Sorry, guys, if this is getting a little spotty. My connection's just awful. Um, I guess I lost my thread. I don't know. I turned my attention to the widget to watch my stream get weaker, and the screen was freezing, so I lost my train of thought. Anyway, They Live. It's awesome. Watch it. Um, Watching this whole thing unfold is kind of a adventure in and of itself. It's like there's this huge weird phenomena that makes people believe something that is either like just absolutely crazy, and that's one possibility, or it's all really happening, and it looks like that's the most likely possibility. So yeah, gang. Okay, stream is still good here. Okay, that's weird. I don't know what's going on my end then. I guess I have some kind of a oddball connection in my studio app. I'll figure it out. um Adam Wright says, in referring to They Live, possibly the greatest fist fight sequence ever filmed as well. It's got a like a 15-minute long fight scene that's just these two guys beating the crap out of each other in an alley, and it's awesome. It's so good. You have to make a meme coin. Panda Universal says you have to make a meme coin for night shift. I am sure a lot of people would huddle. Wonder how many people walked past that worked on UFOs. What was the name of the movie, please? Oh, well, they live. They live. Um, They Live is about, for those of you who don't know, it's a corny, it's corny by today's standards, but it's awesome by today's. It's one of those movies that's so corny that if you can like take that as what, if you accept that going in and you just buy into the experience, it's awesome. It's awesome. Um, Roddy Piper is this blue collar sort of steel worker who is out of work because the economy's in the toilet. He's sort of a drifter. Um, he's kind of just uh, he's sort of between homes and between jobs. His life's in the toilet, and he winds up discovering this box of sunglasses. And when he puts them on, he can see that everything in the world that appears to be like an advertisement or a billboard, they're basically hidden messages. Everything is a hidden message. It's all hidden message mind control. So you look up at a billboard and it's a billboard of any whatever, pick anything. But when you put the glasses on, you look at it, it just says, um, you know, sleep or obey. That's where that whole, you know, that whole thing of the black type on the white background that just says like obey, that whole thing came from They Live. And so he finds out that um, this is going on, and that the whole world is being run by these beings that he can suddenly see. He can see there are real people, there are like regular humans, but when you put the glasses on, you can see that some of them are not human at all. They look like They kind of look silly. It's like a giant skull, but they you could substitute any alien you want in there. And so that's what he sees, and then he finds out there's this whole underground resistance to these aliens, and it's this whole who's in charge and who's controlling the world thing. It's great. Uh, they Live, Repo Man, Escape from New York. There's so many good ones. Subliminal messages, yeah. Reproduce, obey, consume. The face terrified me as a kid. Yeah, it's scary. It's I wouldn't let my little one watch it, but I would watch it. So I watched speaking of things to watch, I watched the oh, before I even go there, hold on. Just a quick update. I want you to go check out this is the UAP sighting tracker that was put together by friend of the show, Patrick Burlingket. Um, UAP sighting tracker map that is, I'm going to have him come back on and explain some of the work he's done on it recently. I have to reach out and see if we can schedule something. But basically, the way this map works, it's aboveus.io. It's linked in the show notes. You can go here and check it out. But this is a tracking map that records instances where people think they've seen a UAP, so they go to Google or they go to a search engine, they search it, and they say, what to do if I saw a UAP, or how to report a UFO sighting, or report UFO. Whenever those searches happen, this Patrick's website picks up that data and then basically lays it out and organizes it in a visual format. So you can go through and see from place to place over the last 24 hours, 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, or year. And it's got it all laid out by time of day, 1 a.m. all the way up to midnight. And this is just going day by day. And then you can zoom in. There's an app for this, and I think the app and the website run a little bit differently. But like here's Atlanta, sightings 98, age range 18 to 65, gender unknown, female, male. Atlanta, Georgia. Here's the zip code. Search terms, and then it shows you the search terms underneath: how to report a UFO sighting, report unidentified flying objects, etc. Um, and then he's got it set up where you can overlay military bases nearby. You can see the military bases, nuclear sites as well. So you have up near Asheville Marine Corps Air Station, and then some sightings over here in Charlotte. So very cool map. Right now, it only covers the North American sector, if I can say that. Hawaii. But I understand that it's going to be going global at some point. It's just a matter of time before that happens. So he's working on that. At least that's the latest information I have. So Patrick, if you're watching this, let's get you back on and you can explain what's going on with the site. Um, I'm looking at this. I am looking at this. Somebody asked me what's going on with the CARET program. Um, I've been reading through this, and it's fascinating. I haven't finished all the way going through everything here again because there's so much. Oh, Chuck Spears, welcome aboard. But CARET's, if I remember right, stands for commercial applications of reverse engineered technologies. Um, let's see if I can find it. It's right down here where they spell that out. I think that's what it was. I'll explain this in just a second, at least as much as I understand. So this person who's putting this out claims to be a person in the know, which there are quite a few of those. Metallic Man, we are just a group of retired spooks that discuss things that you'll not find anywhere else. It makes us unique. Take a look around, learn a thing or two. I don't know. Can you trust a spook, retired or otherwise? Ever? Can you? I don't know. Do we have any spooks in the audience? Sure, we do. Maybe. I don't know. I feel like it's just wise to assume. Anyway, this guy is saying that this CARET program was basically set up by the military. It was a effort to reverse engineer technologies from recovered UAPs or UFOs, and the idea was that they were going to set up a corporation that runs like a Silicon Valley company, and it would internally run exactly like a private corporation would run. It would be have its own teams. They would set up their own um, manuals and style guides and research programs and however they felt like they needed to attack this problem. The idea was that the military was really intrigued by the pace of progress that was coming out of Silicon Valley, and they thought, hey, whatever these guys are doing, we need that kind of fire over at our reverse engineering program. So let's see if we can duplicate that success and recreate something that's funded by us, fueled by uh, recovered technology from UAP, and managed and run internally by a bunch of Silicon Valley software civilians and hardware civilians. And it's a really interesting story. I was reading through it, and it basically kind of walks through what the program was and the whole concept of how it worked. And there's a bunch of material included in here that I can't quite tell if I don't know what I'm looking at, so it's hard to say. Um, I have a lot more reading to do on this, but one thing that was really interesting was they seem to talk about this. Material that it comprises many or much of the technology that they were dealing with. And the material is like a solid metal, but based on the way that if you take a hunk of this metal and you use a specific type of um, writing to inscribe on it a a particular arrangement of letters or symbols, I guess. The arrangement of symbols based on the language that this is all written in determines the function or how that material will respond. And it turns into a piece of technology that does XYZ. So if you need it to be something, you put the right code, you literally write it on the stuff. You write it on the chunk of metal. Somehow you input that, and this block of material of matter self-organizes and becomes something else. That's my understanding of it. I could be completely off and totally wrong on this, but that's what I've got. That's where I've gotten to so far with this whole CARET thing. Um, so apparently there's a lot more to it. There's some pages from some of their manuals. There's photographs of what appear to be just weird objects. These are kind of photocopied out of a manual or a booklet that was part of this. Let's see if I can show you. Here's one. The big thing is the writing. Can I blow this up? This is sort of the close up of two of the I beams that are connected to the anti gravity device, and then it's got this. I'll tell you what this looks like. Hmm. This language looks like, remember in Predator at the remember Predator uh, at the end of Predator when Arnold faces off with the predator. And they have this battle in the jungle, and then basically at the very end, right, when the predator, spoiler alert, predator blows himself up. But when he's activating the explosive device that's on his wrist computer, he's typing in, and some what the characters look like is like what's on these beams here to me. So I think we've solved this mystery. I actually, and quick sidebar on Predator, and then we'll go back to the chat. Predator 2, arguably, now I know Predator 1 is a classic, no question about it. But Predator 2, arguably, is a better movie than Predator 1. It's got a better cast, although they're both awesome. Predator 2's Danny Glover, um, Maria Conchita Alonso. You've got, um, oh my God, who else is in this movie? It's so good. Bill Paxton. Gary Busey. That's right. Gary Busey's in it. And Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton, the only actor to ever be killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator. I got to meet Bill one time, and he was not thrilled to meet me. But that was kind of cool. It was cool for me. I think he was busy. He had stuff to do. Um, Predator 2. Great cast. Gary Busey plays the federal government military Air Force dude who's coming in to basically capture the predator so that they can get their hands on the technology and reverse engineer it. Uh, Danny Glover is a Los Angeles detective who thinks he's investigating a mysterious murder from a drug cartel in the city, but in fact, turns out it's the predator who's come to Los Angeles, of course, with a few days to kill, and he goes around and killing everybody, and then Danny Glover has to deal with it, and it's awesome. But the writing on this looks exactly like that writing. I mean, you can see it. It's right here. Um, I don't know. So, did anybody in the audience, has anybody that's watching or listening, have you guys followed this at all? The CARET program, the CARET leak. Is it legit? Is there more than meets the eye? Rob says, I took a deep dive into that thing before and it's totally fake hoax. You can see it was made using cheap earbuds. Wow. Uh, Hex 80811. Sorry, I only remember the epic high five handshake between Arnold and Carl Weathers in the beginning. Yeah, it's the best. They're both good. They're both good, but it was just Predator 2 was just like a cool cast. It was a completely different environment. They found a way to tell the story that was fresh, but it was the same excitement that you loved from the original Predator, but they did it in a new way with a new cast, and the cast just works really well. And Gary Busey is awesome. I know he is toast now. Like this guy is rough, but I actually met Gary Busey once in a small theater in New York, and he was super weird. It was, but he was the best kind of weird. He was the exact kind of weird you want him to be. And yeah, I met him twice actually. I met him at a Blade Runner screening, and I met him at a little playhouse in New York, and he was just awesome. Chuck Spears says, thought I'd read or heard it all. Never heard of this program. Well, I'll put a link to this in the chat real quick. There's, I don't know if it's linked in the show notes. It should be, but if it's not, let me go ahead and put this in the chat, and then you guys can dig in. Let me know what you think. Here it is. Yeah, Hex 0811, Predator 2 introduced the Predator Alien crossover from the alien skull in the Predator ship. Totally. Yeah. That was a huge moment. If you saw it in the theater, it was like, whoa. Um, Predator 2 opened with an epic bone scene in a skyscraper that 10-year-old me liked very much. Oh, the bone scene. I know what scene you're talking about. I was like, wait, which one? Which oh yeah, that one. I was like the one with all the bones where they pulled the bones out. No. It's a different thing. Um Panda Universal, Clint, you are son of Alien versus Predator. I guess so. I don't know. I don't know what that means. Doug Van Winkle says, I have always believed that they put stuff in sci-fi movies and shows to have us used to it so we don't freak out when it comes out. That is so true. And by the way, on that note, what's going on with the X-Files? Why is there not an X-Files reboot or a new X-Files series happening right now? There's never been a more perfect time for the X-Files than there is right now. And guys, if has anyone, how many people here have seen the X-Files? At least the first like 3 or 4 seasons. Yeah, it's okay if you didn't watch the whole series because towards the end it just sort of jumped a shark. But it's so good. If you are into UFOs and you've never watched the X-Files, go start with season 1 of that show and start watching it and just watch it until you either get bored or it loses you, because it is so consistently good for the first like 4 seasons. And it talks about everything that's going on in the UFO UAP space, like down to the last detail. It's all in there. And we're talking about 1994, 95, 96. Like this is a long time ago. And they were showing it right then and there. And it was awesome. The cast is great. David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson and Mitch Pileggi, awesome. Cigarette smoking man, the lone gunman, the whole thing, just a killer story. Mark Snow did the soundtrack. There's a fantastic episode. There's like a 3-episode arc about this guy named Dwayne Barry, an alien abductee who they drilled holes in his teeth. That episode was written by Vince Gilligan, who went on to create Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Like there was some awesome writing in the X-Files, and they talked about everything. They touched on, well, of course, aliens, UFOs, abductions. They talked about the hitchhiker effect, cryptids. It was all in there, and it was tied together in a way that just no show at the time was really doing. The only thing that came close would be like, I'm gonna flex my nerd cred here. Babylon 5. It's probably the closest thing. They had a big 5-year arc that was just really spelled out. But at that time, that wasn't really being done. So that show is spectacular, and it's so cool. Um, I highly recommend at least the first 3 seasons, at least. Prime David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. Shadow Patriot Terry, The X-Files was so cool. I used to come home and watch it like it was the news. I was so excited to see that show. Stories were hugely influenced by ufology of that era. Boomerang Style says, I had an X-Files shirt in high school. I need a new one. Christopher Cobb, The Smoking Man. By the way, here's another one. Here, I got one for you. The X-Files. You know how we're hearing right now all about this agreement? There was an agreement. We made an agreement with the NHI. There's some kind of an agreement's been made, and maybe the terms have been violated of the agreement, and something is going to happen. You know that rumor? It's everywhere. Like we keep hearing it comes up all the time. That was in the X-Files like 30 years ago. It was that was in the X-Files. The agreement. David Duchovny's character, Fox Mulder's father, worked for the original Legacy program with this other guy who was the cigarette smoking man. And they have all these like shady characters that worked on the old boys program back in the day. And those guys made an agreement. And then the whole show is about what is this agreement? Why was Fox Mulder's sister abducted? And what's it all have to do with the future? And how does it all play out? And it's like a play by play of where we're at today, which is why, again, as we started the show, I said sometimes you have to step back and watch it like it's a movie because it really does feel like we're living in one. No question. Rob Sipes says Fringe is another comparable to X Files. Yes. Jeffrey Wheeler tried rewatching too many episodes, and some are dumb. Some are great, though. Some are dumb, but a lot of them are really good. It's tough. It's tough. We're talking about, a season had 24 episodes, and then there were like 30 seasons. It just went on forever. After a while, it did jump the shark, though. When Duchovny left and they brought in, what's his name? The guy who played the T-1000. Ah, it escapes me. But when he came in, um, and played who was the guy's name? Taggart. He was like he was like the hard-boiled cop who was going to be Gillian Anderson's new partner. It just by the time David Duchovny left, it was over. Was also a Stargate. Doug Van Winkle was also a Stargate fan back then. Stargate is another one. That's a series that really did, I think. I used to not think this, but my wife convinced me that Stargate was hiding little Easter eggs of real information in the series precisely because it was so cheesy. And the way she convinced me was, well, for one, for like 2 years straight, every time I would tell her some UFO news, she was like, "Oh yeah, they did that in Stargate. They did that in Stargate." And I was like, after like the fifth time, I was like, "Really? Did they do all this shit? Are you for real? Show me where they did this in Stargate. Let's watch that episode." And I made her go show me, and like we would go watch it. She's got them all on DVD. And so I'd go watch them, and I was like, "Oh shit, they did do this in Stargate." In fact, there's a really funny episode called Wormhole Extreme. This is in Stargate SG-1, the TV show. Wormhole Extreme is the episode. And in that episode, the Stargate, so the Stargate team, for those of you who don't know, like the four people who have never heard of Stargate, basically the idea is that a discovery is made of this gigantic Stargate ring device that, when activated and activated correctly, can dial up another ring device of similar design somewhere on the opposite side of the galaxy on any number of different worlds. And apparently there's a whole network of these that link together all of these civilizations. And if you know the code, you can dial in, just like a rotary phone, you can basically dial in and dial in your destination, and it will take you there. And so the Stargate SG-1 team is the team of military slash science experts brought together under the Air Force in a secret program to traverse these uh, wormholes and go to these different planets and try to establish contact with some of the other civilizations on the other side of these planets. And what they discover in the series is that not only has the religions of Earth been strongly influenced by non-human intelligence that came here and basically convinced ancient humans that they were gods, but these non-human intelligences do this shit all the time, of course, and all over the galaxy. So they keep going to these different worlds, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, your gods are bullshit. Here, take these guns." And that's kind of the whole idea. It's great. It's corny. It's cheesy. But there's an episode called Wormhole Extreme where the Stargate team, they're making it inside the show, in the world of the show. There is a television series called Wormhole Extreme that is based on this, loosely on this idea. And so the real Stargate people have to be consultants on the show And so they're basically consulting on a fake TV show that it's all very meta. It's hilarious. And in the first 5 minutes, they show the intro to the show, and then they cut to the Stargate team in a meeting. And the general who's in charge of all this, he's like, if any of this ever leaks out, we'll be able to point to this show and say that it was all made up for TV. And that's our cover. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So anyway, I don't know. I'm convinced enough, but you know, it remains to be seen. Who knows, really? All good shows have a wormhole extreme like episode. That's true. Um, all right. What else is going on this week? Oh, there's another website that I think is really interesting. Let me see if I can pull this one up for you. I just found this. This was in a Reddit forum. uh, famous last words. I found this on Reddit. But this website is uapevidence.com. And here we go. Let's turn that off. Whoa. uapevidence.com. Timeline, key people. And it's got all the quotes, all the clips. It's awesome. David Grush, Christopher Mellon, Alex Dietrich. She bailed out quick, didn't she? She was so not into this whole community. I get it. People just gave her such a hard time. Ryan Graves, Paul Hellyer, John Radcliffe, Robert Dean. Robert Dean's the guy. That's his name. Robert Dean is the guy I've been telling you about. He's the one who was like, I worked for NATO, and I read a top secret report. And in that report, it said, the ones they were most afraid of were the ones that looked just like us. We have been infiltrated. I'm doing my Robert Dean impression. Robert Dean, Thomas Wilson, Sean Kirkpatrick, J. Allen Hynek, Bill Nelson, David Fravor, Jim Lakatsky. Jim, we got access to the inside of a craft. Lakatsky, Tim Gallaudet, Carl Nell, Lou Elizondo, Chuck Schumer. These are all the politicians. I mean, it is really notable figures and journalists. What a resource. Celebrity accounts. And then our timeline. This is the first thing we were looking at from 1947, goes all the way up to 2023, congressional hearings. Anomalous captures. They've got this whole thing down here. Photos by year. Calvin. Here's a clip. Whoever put this website together, I want to talk to you. This is awesome. It's got everything. Wow. So this is uapevidence.com. Definitely check it out. If it's not already linked in the show notes, then I'll drop it in there. Let's see if I can do that real quick. BP sighting tracker. I just updated the show notes to include this link, so you can go in there if you want to check that out. uapevidence.com. That's the URL. Okay, so let's get to what we're here for. Can I do this? So I watched the Manhattan Alien Abduction. I'm going to show you the trailer. I hope YouTube doesn't ding me for this, but I've gotten dinged for this in the past. Um, if you haven't already seen it, it's also linked in the show notes, but I'll throw it in the chat as well. And let's take a look at the trailer and then we'll talk about it. I watched the first episode and I want to talk about it. Let's go here. Oh, no sound. Okay, hold on. Let's start over. Let's start over. What happened to my sound? I'm sorry, gang. Sometimes I have to turn the sound down for one reason or another.
They saw me hanging outside my window in a beam of light.
There were 23 witnesses.
I thought it was a movie. Special effects.
I don't know why they're keeping it from the public, but we're not alone.
It would become the greatest abduction case ever seen.
But was there any evidence that this thing had actually happened? I moved to Manhattan to make a film about the alien abduction with my husband, Bud Hopkins.
The existence of an extraordinary phenomenon demands an extraordinary investigation.
Bud believed that she was very, very credible, and the audience loved her.
When people hear this, do they tell you you're nuts?
I'll tell you, Jay, I wish I was psychotic. At least there's treatment for that.
Linda is simply telling the truth. It's as easy as that.
She was pulling the wool over Bud's eyes.
How could she say the things she said after what my family and I went through?
What do you want from me?
One, we're going to end all this. Two, we're moving back now. You're not dying.
Three, you'd have to be a sociopath or a genius to commit a hoax like this.
To me, it began to seem almost too perfect.
After a while, I started to get paranoid. And not just about aliens.
This is mind-blowing.
How could Linda possibly be orchestrating this enormous hoax if that's what it is? How do we know what's real?
It's not easy to believe, let's face it. But these aliens, if they want you, they're gonna get you.
I will continue to ask questions, Linda. And I won't stop doing that.
Bring it on.
Oh. All right, so it's a 3-parter. I've watched episode 1. Sorry about the sound thing. Hex81 says, I hate that Netflix is using a possible affair as misdirection from the abduction story. That's why Bud's wife hates her. Rob Sipe, 2 episodes in so far. I think it's great. Cinematography is great. Stylistically, love it. 100% agree. Stylistically, for those, if you've lived in New York, if you ever lived in New York, you know that it's the only city in the world that has that. It's got this thing. It's just got this vibe that you can't find anywhere else. There's an attitude to that place, and there's a feel to it. And I think part of it is because so many movies have been shot there and so many TV shows. And so there's just so much is constantly, if you're there, like any day of the week, you can be walking around and you're going to walk through at least one movie set or one, uh, I mean, God, it's the Joker, John Wick. They shoot all this stuff all over the city all the time. TV shows constantly, um, and that so it's out there, and it really comes through the personality of the city and the people in it, and it's such a New York story. It's like Bud Hopkins investigating alien abductions uh, in the 80s, and this woman comes forward, says, "I've been abducted." And he starts to talk to her. Her accounts are very strange. Um, it kind of introduces Bud Hopkins as a personality in this investigation or in this whole story, but it definitely seems like they're trying to sort of play it like a almost like a true crime drama. Like there's obviously some kind of misdirection or they play this affair angle, like there's this like all love interest between this abductee that Bud's working with and uh his partner at the time, and she's a documentary filmmaker, and um she's filming this other woman, and there's all this tension and weirdness, and there's just it's kind of a soap opera version of the abductee story. But what's interesting about Bud Hopkins is that he's kind of started down this path, and he gets a lot of heat because he wasn't a trained hypnotherapist. He wasn't a mental health specialist. He was a painter, an artist. And, but he took this seriously, and he had a group of people that sort of coalesced around him. And he went on to write the book Missing Time, which is a great book. You should check it out if you want to learn more about what he was digging into. But he gets heat because he's not a professional, but he's the one who's responsible for getting John Mack involved. And John Mack is, well, at the time was probably one of the preeminent mental health experts. He was the head of psychiatry at Harvard University. He was an author, award-winning author, uh, intellectual, just super brainiac. And he took it seriously because of Bud Hopkins, because it sounded so crazy. He was like, either these people are really legitimately suffering from a mental health crisis, or what they're saying has some truth to it. But either way, it's something that should be looked at. And he started looking into it and found that there was a lot of credible evidence to support the idea. He even went on camera on television many times, and he said, what was the quote? I'm going to try to remember it, but he said something like, "This isn't the way fantasy behaves. This isn't the way dreams behave. This isn't the way imagination behaves. Something real," these are his words, "something real happened to these people. But if something real happened to these people, that is, if beings from another part of the galaxy are coming here and interacting with tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people, then this is a real problem. We need to look at it. We need to take it seriously. That's what I'm trying to do. We're trying to get people to take it seriously. Just look at it." That's basically his message. And so I think these two books pair really nicely. Read Missing Time, but then read Abduction. And what you'll walk away with is a really creepy picture of what's going on. I mean, they must be here to do something, right? And if you want another book to kind of just keep you grounded a little bit, read Richard Dolan's Alien Agendas. This is speculation by Richard Dolan on what exactly may or may not be going on here. The abduction rabbit hole goes very deep, but this first episode just sort of sets up this situation, this scenario. So that's how far I got into it. It's very intense. It's beautifully shot. The story is really interesting. Bud Hopkins is a character, and the other people in the story are awesome. They're total New Yorkers, and this woman that she claims that when she was abducted, she levitated outside of her building and was floating in the air. This is in Manhattan. And 23 people saw this from different points in the city, which is totally reasonable. Like that makes sense. Like you could see stuff happen all the time, depending on where you're at and walking around. If you just look up, there's always something weird happening, but sometimes you could see some really crazy stuff happening. And so I buy that. And there were like all these different witnesses who said, I saw this woman floating in the sky. I thought it was a movie. I thought they were making like a Ghostbusters movie or something. It was like Dana Barrett floating in her nightgown or whatever, but outside the building. So that's really interesting. And I think that the story, at least the idea that there is a series on Netflix exploring this, is a good thing, because it does kind of bring us back around to this part of the conversation that has been sort of ignored for a long time. A lot of people haven't talked about abductions. Used to be discussed a lot more than they are now, but I don't know if that's because that was intentionally just sort of pushed to the side, or if it was just because people stopped coming forward and didn't want to share their stories because they had been ostracized and sidelined for so many years, or called crazy or whatever. But if you listen to recordings of hypnotic regressions when people are talking about their abduction experiences, they're horrifying. Not always. Certainly Preston Dennett has done great work over the years, and he's written a number of books that chronicle positive encounter experiences that people have had with non-human intelligence or various beings of different types. And I've read some of his books, and there's a lot of positive stories. And there's another one that I have here somewhere called UFOs Are Here, Take My Word for It. And it's also a very positive story. But there's a lot of negative, weird, dark stories too. So I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I don't know what to make of it. I'm excited to watch the second episode, but the first one was certainly great and set up the whole story. And it's total New York energy. It's just like, some people are calling bullshit. Some people are like, oh, this is what I saw. You suck. There's just a lot of attitude to it. I thought it was really good. Amy Elizabeth says, who's excited for George Knapp's documentary that's dropping in a few days? I'm super excited. Panda Universal, New York from Romania. We have a vampire from Switzerland. He came here and made trouble. Interesting. Mel Tulip says the abduction part of all this is really important. 23, Terrence Willis says, 23 eyewitnesses seeing her literally floating out of a building is good enough for me. Brian Park says, John Mack and the Ariel School interviews. That's a must watch. That's a huge one. Go watch those little kids explain what they saw. Think about it. Like, trying to get a group of kids to agree on anything you trying to get 2 kids to agree on anything is impossible. Trying to get 20 kids to agree on something with that much detail and that was another case where John Mack actually flew to South Africa and interviewed each one of those children individually. And there's footage of him talking to them, and he's just really great with them, and the way they open up to him and explain what they saw. And you could tell there's no deception in these children. It's just not there. And it's just kind of a chilling moment. Where are we at in the audience? What do you guys think? Are abductions real? If they're real, what does that suggest? What does that mean to you guys? Do you believe they're real? Do you believe they're really happening? Where are you at on that? And then what do you think that means for us? Is it something we should be talking about more. Broadhaven school sightings too. Yep. John Mack was a pioneer in this field. Amy Elizabeth says, John Mack was a pioneer in this field. I appreciate his work so much. Aerial school interviews are incredible. We need more of that now. Chris Hobart got John Mack killed too, or at least that's what I reckon happened. Well, John Mack supposedly, his death was a complete and total accident. Weirdly, he was crossing the street. He was in the UK. He got hit by a car, and I believe that my understanding of the story is they caught the guy who hit him, and the guy was just absolutely wasted, and it was a drunk driver, and he just stepped into the street at the wrong time. Definitely feels suspicious though, but it's been said many times that was ruled an accident, so I don't know. But he was almost thrown out of Harvard, and his tenure was they threatened his tenure, and then Danny Sheehan defended him in front of the review board, I guess, or whatever it was at Harvard that had to make the decision on what to do with him. Adam Wright says there is an abduction phenomenon, but what it actually is, I'm completely agnostic on. Too many shared experiences from strangers around the world pre-communion. It's interesting, yeah, because these days it's different. The communication is such, and it's so instantaneous that we think instantly like, well, yeah, I mean, people can make up shit all the time, and then it gets spread on the internet, and everybody feel. But the early stuff, the stuff that was happening back in the 80s, these were people who didn't know each other, hundreds of people telling similar stories, reporting similar things, and even when they recorded those stories or those their accounts were recorded or written down, they weren't like mass publicized. There was no YouTube. There was no place for anybody else to find this stuff. If it wasn't in a book that you specifically went to the library and like checked out and read, then you probably didn't come across it. The only information that people had about what was going on outside of that stuff would be like daytime talk shows like Oprah Winfrey, which is why John Mack and others were, I think Bud Hopkins did a bunch of talk shows. There was the whole talk show circuit, and these guys would do them. And that was it. That was like whatever you could watch in 40 minutes on daytime talk shows. That's the information you had. So let's see, as soon as Hex 0811 says, in the same way that researchers occasionally pluck a shark out of the ocean, take samples, insert a tracker, do some probing, put it back in that sense, abductions make sense. I often think about that. Like if you catch a fish and throw it back, what that fish must think about what happened. If it has any idea, like what just happened, then does it go back and tell the other fish? I wonder if there are any reported abductions within the last decade, Amy Elizabeth. I feel like they are barely talked about now. Yeah, it is weird. This is all right. So the interesting thing about abductions recently is that Lou Elizondo has started talking about them. And that's a new twist. He's mentioned it. And if you paid attention to Lou's media appearances and his podcast appearances, it seems to me like he is working from a I don't want to say he's working from a script, but he's got like his message evolves over time. So either he's adding new wrinkles to his interviews as he goes, or he's adding new information, or he's revealing new things that he wasn't talking about before. However you want to look at that. But he started to talk about abductions and implants. And we heard that on the Ross Coulthart interview on News Nation. That's been coming up again. So in the end, does this all circle back to implants? And does this all circle back to abductions? Is that the other half of the secrecy aspect to what's going on? Of course, there's the secrecy surrounding the legacy program, Immaculate Constellation, cordoning off, siloing off all UAP related intelligence materials from all these different agencies into a completely self-contained intelligence apparatus outside of the normal chain of communications, making that information very hard to come by unless you know exactly where to look. Immaculate Constellation is the repository of all that. So I guess that's the big treasure chest, if you will, the Immaculate Constellation program. You've got that. But now there's this new, sort of emphasis on what could they be doing. There's secrecy around the actual program of the reverse engineering of the craft, but the mission or the objectives or the motivations of whatever the NHI are remain mostly a mystery. But we're starting to learn more. Various people have been saying, "Oh yeah, there's an agreement. There's some kind of an agreement that's happened." That's been floated around a little bit. Others have said that there's some kind of a timetable, a timeline, and something's going to happen, and we are kind of racing the clock to get people up to speed at a certain level before this clock runs out. And there's the secrecy surrounding that. What are they? What's in store? What does this mean? So it's interesting. And watching from the sidelines, trying to understand what it all means and reason through like how do you, like, I guess the big question is, how do you and I and people, regular people, what do you do? Right? Like, what do you do at home? Is there something to prepare for? And even if even if there is how does one prepare for something we can't really be sure will even happen? And if it does, we don't really know what it's going to be until it happens. Dead Video Club says the threat narrative. Yeah, well, the word narrative is a weird word because it sort of is built into the phrase threat narrative that the threat is a fictional story. Like that it's assumed that there is no real threat. So this is a narrative that's been put together to sort of create the illusion that there's a threat. I don't buy that. I just don't. I don't care what Stephen Greer says. I just don't care. I get it. Stephen Greer is an important figure in ufology. He's made an important contribution and he has a lot to offer the conversation, but he's one guy. He's one guy. And I'll tell you my problem with Stephen Greer, and I think this is a fair criticism, and I would be happy to, he'll never come on this show, but I'd be happy to have this conversation with him. But my issue with Stephen Greer is that he says he knows it all. He's got all the answers. And that's a huge red flag. He's like, I'm the only guy who knows what is actually happening. And if you notice, watch his interviews, watch them. It always comes back to him. You could ask him a question about anything and he will find a way to make the conversation come back to him. And sometimes it's really ham-handed the way he does it. The question could be something like, Mr. Greer, over the decades, hundreds of people, thousands of people have reported being abducted by aliens. What do you make of this? And I don't know if this is his actual position, but his answer usually will come out something like this. He'll go, oh, that's all us. That's all the, black helicopters. That's all secret undercover government programs. That's all, that's not the NHI don't do that. That's something that our military does. In fact, and then he'll do it like this. As soon as he gets like 10 seconds into like an answer, and then he'll go, in fact, just the other day, I was briefing a guy. He, was a big wig at the CIA for like 25 years. I was briefing him and he told me that they run these programs all the time. And then you could ask another question. You'd be like, well, Mr. Greer, what do you think about CE5 protocols? You say that's the best way to kind of handle contact. We should all do it together. Can you talk a little bit about this? And he's like, well, I developed a CE5 protocol. In fact, I was briefing the president. I can't tell you which president, but I was briefing a president of a very powerful country and a number of security officials, very high levels of government just the other day. And then blah, 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 blah. He's always leaving a briefing or, he's on his way to a briefing or he just left a briefing or he briefed some people on his way to the bathroom. There's a briefing constantly. And so he positions himself as this guy who's at the center of the entire conversation. And yet he is very squarely way off to the side here, like doing something in his own world, and then there's this whole other world unfolding over here. So we talked a little bit about this on Friday, like sort of these super personalities in the UFO space, and how people sort of coalesce around them. And I just think you have to be careful. You got to be careful with all that stuff. There could be a threat. Why couldn't there be a threat? What some people get really bent out of shape with that idea, but they're not comfortable with that idea or that conversation. But in our own history here on Earth, every time a more advanced, air quotes on more advanced civilization comes into contact with a less advanced, air quotes on less advanced civilization, it usually works out pretty poorly for the less advanced civilization. Air quotes, air quotes, air quotes, around all this. Because, it's just two cultures clashing, coming together, and there's some kind of something gets lost. One gets absorbed into the other. There's that danger. It doesn't always have to be some overt like military threat where they come flying in from wherever and bomb all our cities. Like, I don't think that's necessarily what the threat would be. I think that's kind of a Hollywood idea of what a threat is, but there are many ways that contact with an intelligent civilization can be threatening. For one, you would instantly not be the most powerful government in the world. Like, once people know that the American government is surpassed by this other superpower, non-human intelligence with this amazing technology, if they establish their presence, make their presence known, and then they just stick around and they don't go anywhere and they're just here, what does that do to people psychologically when they think about the power structure of when their government tells them to do something, if they don't agree and they're like, I just don't agree with that. The fact that there's some other element that's superior and has more power, does that destroy our ability to self-govern? Is this maybe what Danny Sheehan was referring to at Yale when he talked about we have to act now to maintain our sovereignty and our autonomy and our agency? Because if these things do appear and suddenly make their presence known, maybe that's the threat. Maybe they just show up and they go, we're in charge now. There's no war. There doesn't have to be. There's just, guess what? All your shit doesn't work anymore. We just turn it all off. I mean, that's the kind of power we're talking about. Like, they could do that. All your nuclear weapons, all your aircraft carriers, we just go ahead, try to start them up. They don't work anymore. Brian Park says, talking at people, I think you're referring to Dr. Greer, doesn't necessarily mean you are briefing them. Yeah, talking at people. Hillbilly Herb, did we already talk Manhattan Abduction? Just watched it last night. Don't know what to think. I just watched the first episode. We talked about it a little bit because I only watched the first episode, so I still have 2 more to go. But we did get into it a little bit. What'd you think, Hillbilly? Adam Wright says, Night Shift, are you familiar with the Monroe Institute, Project Stargate, research ability to contact NHI decades before CE5 protocols? I am familiar with that. And there's this idea that Greer has that, look, I know not everybody agrees with me. I think, and Xander and I, we are on differing sides of this conversation. So I don't want to be disrespectful to people who are heavily invested into Stephen Greer. I will say this. When I first found myself getting deeply involved in the UFO topic, it was Stephen Greer that got me excited about it. He was the one that initially caught my attention, and I started to look into this. And then I was reading Richard Dolan stuff and Nick Pope, and from there I started to kind of branch out. Jim Marrs wrote a number of great books. The late Jim Marrs, who was a real no bullshit kind of Texas newspaper guy. And so I think Greer gets it right in many respects. I think a lot of what he says is important and valuable. He, specifically notion that the technology that we are probably sitting on, that looks like we're sitting on, or have been reverse engineering for decades, is powerful enough that it could catapult our civilization ahead like 1,000 years over the course of a generation, which would be the equivalent of like going to sleep on a Saturday night in this world and waking up in Star Trek world the next day. I mean, it would be like that huge. Think about what we've done in 30 years, 40 years. Like a lot of the stuff that was just science fiction on Star Trek just like 40, 50 years ago. We've already invented it. We already have it. Imagine if we could leapfrog another 1,000 years from here. What would that mean? So I think that part of what he's saying makes sense. The idea that there is some sort of a secretive cabal overseeing this research, restricting this technology, that makes sense. But where I differ from him is where he says the NHI are absolutely harmless. They are not a threat. There's nothing. They're not here to do anything other than help us. I don't know how one man could know that. I don't accept that one guy just knows that because he says he does. Like, really? Are you kidding me? Like, I'm supposed to buy that shit? You're going to have to show me some receipts, pal. I just can't. And that goes for all these guys. And I think it's important for us in the community to, cast a sideways glance at some of these people from time to time and go like, what are you doing here? What are you trying to do here? There's a lot of information. There's a lot of different narratives, if you want to use that word, floating around, and it definitely feels like the community is being influenced from a variety of different angles. And these are trained intelligence people that do this stuff. This is what they do for a living. So it's hard to know where it's coming from, who's doing what, how it's being done. You just have to assume that there's a large percentage of information in this space right now that is inaccurate, either deliberately or by just virtue of the fact that we can't verify it. So we just don't know what we have. And so it's just, you can't trust it. That's what makes disclosure so critical. This would be a project, a process overseen by the Congress of the United States, by the Department of the or the National Archives and the Justice Department. And it would actually establish a real reliable data set that people could actually start to work from and build on from there. I think that's largely what the Soul Foundation is trying to do is get academia more involved in this so we're not so reliant on military or intelligence communities leaks. We can start to establish our own evidence and figure out what's going on. Adam Wright says, 100% agree, Clint. It's magical thinking or delusional to expect a benign NHI. You know what's more realistic, guys? I don't even think it's like they're negative or positive. You just have to think like they're different. They're going to have different motivations. They're not like you and they're not like me. They weren't, they didn't have a human experience. They weren't like born into a family where they didn't, know who they were. They had to grow up, figure themselves out, get a job, like build a career. They don't have any of those problems. They don't have, they fall in love, then somebody leaves them, and then their life falls apart. They become an alcoholic. They recover. They figure themselves, whatever, and they achieve something. Like all the things that go into a human life, that go into making up who you are, all the risks you take and the things that you avoid and the things that you seek out and the lessons you learn and the personal tragedies you have to absorb and process. And it's those things, those complexities that make you who you are. That's the human experience. It's the fact that you are in a limited body that only has a few years before it craps out on you. And it's true for all of us, and we all experience it. And it's like some of us are at the end of that journey and some of us are at the beginning and some of us are at the middle. An NHI is going to be from a completely different origin. Whatever its origin is, it doesn't matter. It's not yours. And it's not going to share the same value set that you have. And this idea, I think a lot of the confusion in this community comes from people who come forward and say they're super certain. They know beyond the shadow of a doubt what's going on. So just trust me, bro. You should be trusting anybody. What we need are federal investigators with handcuffs and subpoenas going in to find the evidence. You gotta go get it. You can't wait for them to come to you. They're not going to. They've gone to extreme lengths. They've murdered people. They've done all these things. They've spent billions of dollars hiding this whole program. They are not going to just willy-nilly come forward and like reveal what's going on. You got to go get it. I hope that's what Congress is getting ready to do, but who knows? But the Disclosure Act, the way it was originally written, the original 64-page document with all its teeth, would have given power to the federal government to go in and can establish ownership over all this material. And that's what the big resistance was all about. It was like, well, we can't have the federal government come in here and say they own this stuff. It's ours, and we own it, says the military industrial complex. And since those two, or, the military industrial complex kind of runs the government, sort of, and they kind of, one hand washes the other, who's actually in control? It's a huge problem. So you need some ball buster to go in there and say, we're just going to go show up. This is, one of those things, like a few years ago, there was this whole what was it called? Storm Area 51. Remember the Storm Area 51 group? Storm Area 51 group. These were the guys that on the internet, there was a group who sort of self-organized, and their whole idea was they were gonna like get thousands of people to go to Area 51 and just go there on the same day. And career creeps me out. And Lou Elizondo was like, absolutely do not do that. It says on the sign outside of Area 51, right before you go in, that they will use lethal force if you go in there. Do not do it. Don't test them. They will shoot you. And he's right. Nobody should do it. But if 10,000 people showed up, would they shoot 10,000 people? Like, what would happen? I don't know who was in charge of that group, but like at a certain point, the group is just so big you can't manage it anymore. So I wonder, like, how would that even work? But what happens if you have a sort of crisis where, I mean, geez, we had a crisis a few years ago where a group of people didn't agree with the results of the election. They didn't think their guy, they thought their guy won when he didn't. And they tried to overthrow the U.S. government. I was out fixing my car. I had my door panel off and I was rewiring a speaker. And I look at my phone and I'm like, holy shit, these guys are storming the Capitol. This is a revolution happening right now. This is crazy. What would happen if Congress just decided, you know what, let's go get it. Let's just go get some of this stuff. Let's see what's up. How far can you push that where it's like, oh, it's national security. We can't tell anybody, not even Congress, not even the president. Like, it can't be, you can't make information so classified that no one can know it. Someone's got to know. Dick Cheney, I guess. Brett Carlson says, how about raid the secret mountain in Arizona? Let us in the alien base. Amy Elizabeth says, I just hope the congressmen and women who are pushing this maintain their seats and stay on course. Just like Star Wars. Stay on target. The Cosmic Serpent says, the group protecting the stuff might be overthrown, not by citizens, but by other intelligence officials and military. So there was an interesting post on, again, famous last words on Reddit. And I'm going to read it to you because I thought it jumped across my radar this morning when I was scanning for stories. And I thought this was interesting, the way this was written. So this is, let me close all these down. 2027. This is in our UFOs. The Witching Hour 73 says, Now, I'm just reading this because I think this person makes an interesting point, and I want to just throw it out there for discussion. 2027, the United States is on the brink. This is the title. In 2027, an alien invasion or them showing themselves doesn't seem likely, but what does, in my opinion, is a foreign adversary disclosure. And then here they go. They go, 2027, the United States is on the brink, a country under high stress, tension, and divide. Influence from Russia, China, Iran, playing on both sides of the political spectrum for years to radicalize the two sides against the U.S. government and each other. The Cold War never ended for Russia, so they're tearing us apart from the inside out. This is their war, a war of misinformation and indoctrination. What major event could finally flip the switch from the general lore of the UFO phenomenon and can I do this? From the general lore of the UFO phenomenon and here we go. We need some music. And big heads doing the talking. China and Russia both have an awareness and even reverse engineering programs, much like the US does. For decades, people have been outspoken about mistrust in the US government keeping secrets, and now we're well aware the secret has caused the death of many Americans, robbed taxpayers of billions of dollars towards black programs, and created a private entity capable of breaking law, dodging the magnifier, and hiding the legacy of crime, especially knowing that this tech could change humanity. So what if a country like China breaks disclosure towards the world? Surely minds will change towards the phenomenon throughout the world, probably in small ways, but the world would have this awareness that we are not alone on this planet. But what if they did it in a way that created a negative narrative against the United States? So this is kind of something that we've talked about on this channel a little bit from time to time. What if another country just discloses first? Like, what if they just... It's not necessarily like the United States is holding all the cards, right? China's got reverse engineered craft. Russia has reverse engineered craft. Can you imagine what would happen in North Korea? If a craft goes down in North Korea, I'm guessing the Chinese get it, right? Like, certainly the North Koreans can't do anything with it. What are they going to do? India, Pakistan? I guess anything that goes down in the United States sphere of influence, we get. China, Russia, they take their bits and pieces. So we have 3 or 4 or 5 different reverse engineering programs all moving along at various rates of progress. What happens if somebody else does something first before we do? How does that change the game? Like, what if China just demonstrates an anti-gravity craft, like a functional anti-gravity craft? And they're like, we've got one. Or what if they don't demonstrate it and they've got it and it's all classified, and the day we find out about it is the day they use it against us in some crazy way? I don't know, gang. R is for repair says, makes you rethink why North Korea and Russia have become so close. Well, that's the other thing too, right? Like, it's so weird. We're in such a... Israel is attacking Lebanon. Iran. There's going to be... This conflict is probably going to expand. Russia is fighting in Ukraine. 10,000 North Korean troops are in Russia training. They're going to be deployed, and they don't send 10,000 troops if they're not going to deploy them. Those guys are going to Ukraine. So you have North Korean soldiers fighting alongside Russian soldiers in a war with a NATO country. A nuclear power fighting this war. The Ukrainians are fighting back with American weapons. The French want to get involved. The Germans, I think, want to get involved if they're not already. I mean, beyond where they're at right now, right? European friends, help me out. What is the current situation in the EU? It feels like we're on the brink of something huge. Just feels like any minute something could go haywire. Right after the election, usually, it's been my experience that right after a big election, usually in the next quarter, there's some kind of crazy news event that just captures the world's attention. I wouldn't be surprised if some or one or more of these military conflicts just explodes in a much more dynamic way. Amy Elizabeth says, I'm still not over the drones for 17 days over a U.S. base. Sage Sleuth, North Korea is definitely getting something out of the deal. Well, North Korea just tested their best ballistic missile yet that has a range of, I forget how many thousands of miles, but it can hit the U.S. mainland for sure. ARVs must be out there, Brian Park says. Lazar mentioned all nations were present at S4 for a time. What changed? I wonder. Yeah, he said, what didn't he say? There were Russians, there were all kinds of different nationalities, different scientists all there. And then later, other people said, and that had been, I think, backed up by other people. And then at some point, that is no longer the case. And I think who was it? Was it Dan Burrish who said that there was a Russian gunship helicopter that they used to transport people around? It's kind of a weird statement. Very specific, very weird. Cosmic Serpent says, Clint, couldn't agree more. The situation in the EU is totally crazy, and the elections will for sure affect what will happen next. Afghanistan had weapons of mass destruction, yet we raid their museums as soon as we get boots on the ground. The world right now is a 50-year-old jalopy, unrestored classic car, banging and wobbling and misfiring at 90 miles an hour down a dark highway. Something's got to give. That's true. Trinimax says, it was Dan Burrish. He talked about the Committee of Majority or something. Yeah, I think it was the MJ-12 thing. Stephanie Erickson, great question. Wonder if and when open contact comes, we won't all be told to shelter in place. Got lots of practice at that. That's an interesting question. I wonder what's going to happen on that day if it does take place. Oh. Hold on. There's a person asking a question. Sorry, gang. Okay. That's a great question. So what would happen? What would happen if open contact took place? Well, we know that the SETI has published their protocols for detection of a signal. By the way, we're going to have Simon Holland on Friday. He's going to come back and talk to us about quantum communications devices. He's got a video coming out this week, and we're going to talk to him on Friday. But yeah, if there was a signal and it was detected and it was partially or fully decoded and we were able to get the information and it was announced, I don't think they would tell people to shelter in place. But if there was a mass contact event and ships showed up and appeared in, over all major cities in the world or something like that, I think there would definitely be a shelter in place, like stay put, go turn on your TV, wait for updates kind of a situation. And I have my sense is that that's what is in the air. I'm going to say it that way. That's what feels like it's in the air. But I want to be clear. I'm not saying I know this is going to happen or I'm 100% convinced this is going to happen. I'm saying it's in the air because in the UFO community, we are participating in a gigantic, weird group game of telephone about something. And none of us really, really know what it is. But it feels like there are breadcrumbs sort of leading us to the conclusion that some huge event is going to take place. And so I think individually, we each sort of reach into our mind and our imagination and we try to grapple with what that might be like. And then in the act of discussing that with one another, I think we have created this sort of group concept of some meta concept of some huge thing that could be a real showstopper. It feels that way. And so, and then those are the way, it's the way that I talk about it on this channel. I think most of us would agree that that seems like what's in the air. Stuff like this has come and gone for decades. It's not any different this time. It may be that nothing happens and everything just keeps on going. And then it's like, whatever. But if there was ever a time where it did feel like that something was going to happen, this is it. I mean, it definitely feels more like something's going to happen than it has in the past. What do you guys think? Chris Bledsoe says in 2026 Easter, there will be a shift in knowledge. That could mean anything. Chris Bledsoe is an interesting case. His story's been coming up again recently. We've been talking about Chris Bledsoe a lot. I'm just reading the chat messages while we talk here, and just, you guys are great. I don't know, gang. I don't know. It's a crazy time to be alive. We're all here together. We're enjoying this together. We're watching this movie unfold. It's hard to describe. It really is. It's hard to know what is real and what's not. It's a messy information sphere. But we're doing our best to figure it out together as a group. That's what Team Night Shift is all about. That's what Night Shift is about. That's what you guys are about. And that's why I'm so glad that we've been able to create such a strong community here. And, these members only Mondays are kind of loose. I try to keep it relaxed and just cover things that are coming across the radar that I think are interesting. But it's also a chance to chit chat with you guys and see where your head's at. What do you think? What are you thinking about? What are your questions? It's exciting. It's the most exciting thing that you can be a part of. If it turns like we only have to be right once. We really only have to be right once. If we're right and something huge does happen, and it's a game changer, an announcement of a signal from a technosignature from an intelligent civilization, an announcement of a signal being received from an intelligent civilization, mass contact event, anything like that. If that stuff happens, then you guys are on the bleeding edge of all of that. UFOs, UAPs, ufology is having its punk rock moment right now. It was sort of in the shadows for a long time. People didn't want to be associated with it too much unless they were really nerdy, super geeky into it. But it's kind of, it's going mainstream. And you're seeing that now. You're seeing all these people get switched onto it, coming on board, watching documentaries on Netflix, watching movies, watching shows, and then getting interested in it, leaping into it, reading books, watching other things. And it's, this space is growing. in a amazing way. And I don't think that's by accident. I don't think that's just because it's interesting. It is interesting, obviously. It's got all the elements of great science fiction. It's got time travel. It's got aliens. It's got intergalactic federation of super civilizations. It's got supercomputers. It's got faster than light travel. It's got ancient aliens. It's got military secret underground bases. It's got secret space force. It's got whatever, as far as you can imagine, anything you could think of. The collective space of the UAP UFO conspiracy world contains that. It's like, forget Marvel, forget the Marvel expanded universe, forget Star Wars, forget all that crap. Like, what we're talking about here, if even 10% of it is true, if even 5% of it's true and can be proven, then it's like we're living in a whole different world than the one that we thought we were in. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing about all of this, is just how big it is, how all-encompassing it is. It's literally the biggest story in human history. And when it breaks, it's going to break one time. It's going to happen one time. If open contact happens, it's going to be huge, and it's going to happen on one day. And there's going to be all of human history will be broken into the period before that day and the period that comes after that day. And if any of us are around to watch it, and we're all seeing it together, it is going to be the most exciting event that's ever happened. The big question is, when it comes, what happens the week after, the month after, the year after, 5 years after, 10 years after? What happens when people get to a point where, like, there's going to come a moment after contact, assuming contact takes place, there's going to come a moment where, like, that year, there's going to be children born into a world where that's just the life now. That's our real life. We have contact with this other civilization, and these kids are going to grow up in that world. And for them, it'll be normal. And I think about this sometimes. I think about, like, in my own life, I remember I'm a member of the last generation that's going to ever have any memory of what life was like pre-internet. And that, when you think about it, is really weird. There's not many people, there's going to come a point where there's a few of us left. It's like World War II or World War I, these old timers that they were around and then they're not around anymore. And then that's it. Like, we're just in this new world. I think contact is going to be like that. And there's going to come a time in the future where people will be like, what was it like before? And somebody like me, I'll be 150 years old in my robotic suit walking around like Terminator, whatever, talking about it. And then someday no one will care what we think, and it'll just be, that's the new world. But it's an exciting journey. Rhett Carlson says, amen. Me too, Clint. All right. So with that in mind, it's time to wrap up for today. That's my time. It's coming up on 4:00 Eastern time. Go pick up Missing Time by Bud Hopkins. Read it. Don't read it before you go to bed. It will keep you up at night. Pick up John Mack's Abduction. Read this book. It's thick. Mine's full of notes. Pick that up. And then round out the trilogy with Richard Dolan's Alien Agendas. I'm telling you, these 3 books are going to blow your mind. They're all excellent. And they are, especially if you're watching the Manhattan Alien Abduction, you're really going to enjoy them. It's going to add a lot of context to all this. Don't forget, please, to like and share this video. You don't have to share it, but like it. Just give it a thumbs up. It helps. It helps. Members only Mondays, they're a little relaxed, a little loose. They can't all be spectacular. I gotta pace myself a little bit. So help me out, help me grow the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming a subscriber. It's super easy, doesn't cost anything. It helps me out. And we started this channel just over a year ago we had 100 people. We had less than 100. At one point, we had, 20, 30 subscribers, and then it was 100. And then it was 400. And I was like, oh my God, 400. And then it hit to 1,000. And then it went to 2,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, 14,000, 15,000. I was like, oh my God, 16,000. And we just broke 17,000 subscribers. We're well on our way to 20,000 subscribers, and then onwards and upwards to 100,000. And we are making great progress along the way. We're making some great friends, great relationships, great contacts. We've had some great interviews on the channel, fascinating people, friends of the show. I'm excited to have all these guests come back. And the more subscribers that I have, the more guests I can convince to come here and hang out with us and talk to us and, answer questions. By the way, we're doing a new thing on the channel. We started doing live call-ins. We're going to try to do those on Wednesdays and or Fridays, depending. I've got to have some help to make all that work. It takes a couple of us to pull it off because there's some coordination that has to happen. But live call-ins from the audience, just like radio, anywhere in the world, you can call in, ask your question, participate in the conversation, be a part of the show, talk to our guests. It's something new that we're trying out. It's super exciting. I hope you'll join us for that. I'll be back Wednesday with a deep dive into something, not entirely sure what yet. And then on Friday, Simon Holland's going to join us, and we're going to be talking about quantum communications, the ET signal, possibly, and some of the other things that are going on in that space. So join us on Wednesday. Definitely join us on Friday. And if you want to help us out, go to teamnightshift.com, check out the website, get on the mailing list, pick up a shirt, pick up a mug. Here's a mug. Got my uniform on. That's it for now, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up.